Friday morning, everyone. I hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving. I'm wearing my Scottish Rite, beat up Scottish Rite baseball cap, and I'm doing it for a reason this morning because in response to uh, a really fun email exchange, uh, I want to uh, I want to comment briefly about the esoteric aspect of Masonry today, and specifically the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, of which I am a proud 32nd degree uh, initiate of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, Southern Jurisdiction, whose headquarters is in Charleston. Uh, but anyway, Constance and I had a wonderful, quiet Thanksgiving, and I hope you survived your Thanksgiving. A lot of times, Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners in this day and age of polarities can be even more stressful on the family than usual. So I hope you survived okay and are looking forward to a more routine weekend ahead. I know we are. I had the great pleasure of once again being the guest of Rob McConnell. I think Rob and I are probably distant cousins because my mother's side of the family are McConnells. Okay, but Rob McConnell, the famous broadcaster in Ontario, Canada, and his television / radio show is the X Factor. It's a very good show. It's been on for many years, and with the passing of Art Bell and things like that, he provides a wonderful broadcast service. Anyway, we talked about all sorts of things, including the magic of Aleister Crowley, and but we went off on tarot and all sorts of other things. So if you're a regular fan of the X Factor, it was live, I believe. Well, actually, it was recorded and will be playing soon. So be on the lookout for the X Factor, Rob McConnell, and my interview. We had a lot of fun, although the living room was very cold. I was cold. Anyway, I've been in a very good email exchange with a fellow Freemason who is at the present time not particularly esoterically inclined. As a matter of fact, he held the esoteric aspect of Masonry in low regard, okay, and because he stressed his involvement in the craft, other things to focus on, including the wonderful charity work and social services work, and patriotic or nominally patriotic work of the craft. And Masonry is a big tent, but he's very uncomfortable with the Kabbalah and everything. Now he is a Scottish Rite Freemason too, and Scottish Rite has 32 degrees. The first 3 degrees in the United States are really it's called Blue Lodge Masonry. That's what makes you a Master Mason. Those three degrees. But the Scottish Rite then goes 4th through 32nd. But they're not linear. So the Scottish Rite is a separate concordant body. Okay, you never get a higher degree than the 3rd degree Master Mason. Everything else is lateral. Okay, so and in the United States, you can get to be a 32nd degree Mason by taking just a handful of those 20 some degrees that are like the landmark degrees, okay? And you don't actually take, from 4 to 14. You don't take and experience those intermediate degrees. And so you can become a 32nd degree Mason and a full-blown bona fide 32nd degree Mason just in a weekend, okay, 2 or 3 full days of wonderful dramatic experiences. But there are certain valleys, certain jurisdictions where the facilities and the participation is such that you can take each one of those degrees from 3 to 32, and that takes a little more time. It takes every Friday of your life for a year or so, but it's very rewarding. So my brother, who I was talking to, or writing back and forth, had only taken those landmark degrees. Okay, we were both 32nd degree Masons, but our Masonic experience is a little different. Mine had a lot more hours into it. Okay. That being said, okay, my Scottish Rite body in Long Beach, California, which is my dad's old Scottish Rite body. It was great. When I first walked into it's like a cathedral. It's a huge, beautiful place. I found my dad's class of '48, and I picked him out of the photograph they took. It was kind of fun. Anyway, I was 50 years old when I became a Master Mason, and 50 and 51 years old when I went through the degrees of the Scottish Rite. And it was soon made known to my brothers that I wrote books, okay, and that I had written a book on the Kabbalah, the chicken Kabbalah. And I was surprised one evening when I showed up when the class master of certain degrees had my book and said, "Would you like to teach before each one of the degrees?" The degrees is like a beautiful play. Okay, you sit in the audience with your cap on, and well, you don't have a cap until a certain degree, but you sit in the audience and watch this wonderful drama, and there's a candidate uh, who plays. There's a guy who plays the part of the candidate, and there's always multiple pledges and things that everybody does, and oaths and things like that. And so the audience really doesn't have a chance to fall asleep, although some guys gave it a good try. Uh, and where you stand up and take certain oaths and make signs and do things like it's for a drama that you watch, it's experiential, okay, and very, very rewarding. But anyway, before each of those evenings of the degree they're going to confer that night, there's a class, a classroom thing with you know, not a chalkboard, but the equivalent of that, and you get not only kind of the summary of the history of the degree, but the esoteric and moral lessons that the degree was intended to focus on. And pretty early on, a lot of that is esoteric stuff, hermetic stuff. And a little higher up, it gets overtly Kabbalah. They mention Kabbalah in the rite itself, and if you've seen Manly Palmer Hall's Secret Teachings of All Ages, Manly Hall was a Mason, and that's the kind of stuff they get into. But as an initiate, you're not, or as a member, you're not obliged to go study and be a Kabbalistic. You're not obliged to do it. Okay, in a sense, your officers are obliged to expose you to it. But you have to take control of your own esoteric education yourself, and that was kind of the bone of contention between me and the fellow I was talking for, because he was feeling that I was denigrating Masons that aren't interested in that kind of stuff, which is not the case at all. So I want to read you a couple things. One of the things I'm going to read you is part of my opening lecture for the particular degree. You don't have to know what degree, but one that is overtly Kabbalistic and that I was asked to be the class master of. But first, I want to read you just a couple paragraphs of my opening to a gathering of esoteric Masonic scholars. Believe me, I was the biggest putz on the whole panel. These guys were up there, okay, and I was very honored to be asked to address them. And it was in an environment like a 3-day weekend where we all gathered in a awesome Masonic edifice, stayed there, breakfast together, lunch together, had dinner together, discussed papers, presented things, had daily meditations. It was like how I always pictured Masonry to be. I fantasized Masonry to be like this. And of course, It wasn't. Okay. But then it was, because within the brotherhood, an event like this could take place. So, let's see, I'm going to skip over a bunch of stuff. Okay, I'm truly honored and profoundly humbled to be part of the work, this work. Okay. The weekend has been richly rewarding experience for me. As a matter of fact, this is exactly the way I dreamed Masonry would be. A diverse band of esoteric thinkers, of seekers, bound to each other by a shared dedication to the great work. Gathering amidst the towering forest of marble columns in one of the most beautiful and symbolically rich buildings in the world, I am not exaggerating. Here to discuss and, more importantly, experience the hidden mysteries of human existence. Savor it, my brothers, because I believe at this point in time, it doesn't get any better than this. We're all very fortunate indeed, that Providence has conspired to bring to us an appreciation of this fundamental sublime aspect of the craft. As we all know, we are at present a small minority within the general membership, and in some places vilified and persecuted minority at that. Oddly enough, in many areas, those of our ilk are not in the minority among non-Masons who would like to join the fraternity. The irony of this situation isn't lost on those of us here, but as we all know, it is completely lost on many of our aging and obstinate brethren, who because of religious and social intolerances would rather see the craft die with them rather than open her doors to younger men whose lives and attitudes do not pander to their patently un-Masonic prejudices. But as my father told me, Masonry is a big tent. And for that we should be very grateful. After all, she welcomed us, didn't she? It'd be a profound mistake for us to denigrate the exacting and heroic labor of brothers with whom we may have little in common except our mutual obligations and the art form that is our ritual work. As a matter of fact, whether we realize it or not, I believe that even the most esoterically inclined of our brethren can't escape a big dose of heavy mystical medicine just by participating in the esoteric work of the craft. The title of my talk is Ritual Work, Memory Work, and the Fear of Death in Public Speaking. That was my talk, and this is just the introduction. I know that might sound light and even silly, but believe me, I've been known to be silly, but this morning I'm in deadly earnest, and I go on with that. Okay, how would I go about addressing a room full? I think it was around 30 people for each class, okay? And each class in this series, well, it took a year of weekly. I'm not exaggerating. I believe it was every Friday night for a year for us to get through everything. But how I would even start to introduce the brethren to Kabbalah. Now, I'm going to hold up two books right now. When my dad was initiated into the 32nd degree, or the members of the class all got this book, and I talk about this book because I thumbed through it as a child, as a kid, okay? Morals and Dogma by Albert Pike, okay? Now you think this is thick. There's tons of Albert Pike stuff, okay? Esoteric Albert Pike stuff. He was, besides being a Confederate general, uh, uh, he was kind of the Crowley of his day. I know that might sound terrible, a lot of Mason. But anyway, Morals and Dogma. Now, it has a huge index in back. As a matter of fact, this whole section from about here on is index. And there's page after page just in the index of pages that reference the Kabbalah. Now they spell it Kabbalah. So you can't say, because you're handed this at the end of your 32 experiences, you're handed this and say, study this. Okay. Dad hardly ever cracked it open. Okay. As a matter of fact, I would wager that I cracked it open as a kid. Okay. More times than Dad cracked it open. Of course, I didn't understand hardly a word of it. Okay. But it impressed me for sure. Okay. I had a big pad. It wasn't a blackboard, but it was a big pad, and I had drawn out a classic tree of life, okay? And I had drawn out the Hebrew letters Yod, He, Vav, He, okay? I think that was the extent of my audio-visual thing, okay? But even the classroom was cool. There was a big podium with a double-headed eagle that was carved out of wood, and But I digress. Oh, I'm going to go too far over. I hope you don't mind. Okay, I've studied Kabbalah for over 25 years before I joined the Scottish Rite. So we're pushing 50 years now. Oh, as a matter of fact, we are pushing 50 years. 25 years before I joined the Scottish Rite and was privileged to audit all the degrees presented here in Long Beach. My familiarity with Kabbalistic concepts amplified my appreciation of the rituals, and boy, did it. Okay. And I felt bad for some of the others in the class who were missing out on many of the symbolic treasures presented in each ritual. If you're lucky enough to have Morals and Dogma with the digest index at the end, you'll notice that there are no less than 65 direct references to Kabbalah. In addition, there are literally hundreds of additional references to Kabbalistic concepts, traditions, and buzzwords. Now, I'm going to show you another book, because this is the book that we get now. And it's an excellent book, too. And it's not secret. You can buy it yourself. It's called A Bridge to Light by Rex Hutchinson. Okay? A Bridge to Light. And see on that cover, he's got Morals and Dogma. It is the new improved, not new improved, it's the digest. And sort of a modern take, because Pike can be kind of archaic in its language. And it's got cool illustrations of all of the degree goodies and stuff. Okay, Bridge to Light, because I'm quoting from Hutchinson in this little lecture. In the index of A Bridge to Light, we find 35 direct entries for Kabbalah. and the text is also filled with many additional Kabbalistic references. Obviously, and I have to say, the word Kabbalah is used multiple times in the rituals themselves, okay, and in the addresses to the candidates from the stage, okay. Obviously, Kabbalah should be a subject of interest to Scottish Rite Masons. The Kabbalah is a huge subject, and we're obviously not going to learn very much in the 10 minutes or so we have tonight. But let's at least try to scratch a tiny bit of the surface. I'll talk fast, and I should be around afterwards to answer questions and try to lure you out of the parking lot to buy my book. I brought some chicken Kabbalahs in the parking lot. Like drugs. Okay, what is Kabbalah? Let's start by learning what it is not. Kabbalah is not a religion. We often hear Kabbalah a reference to as Hebrew mysticism, which is accurate up to a point. But more than that, the Kabbalah, like Freemasonry, is non-sectarian and opens her mysteries to sincere and diligent seekers of any and all religious persuasions. Kabbalah is not a belief system, although there are a number of Orthodox institutions that apply the tools of Kabbalistic thought to engage in exegesis upon various scriptures they hold sacred. The Kabbalah is itself not a belief system. Rather, it is a way of looking at things. It is a way of organizing the universe so neatly that we eventually can discover our own place in it. It is a way of connecting absolutely everything in the universe with absolutely everything else until eventually we achieve a level of consciousness in which we realize there is nothing left to connect. Kabbalah is not a book, but there are many Kabbalistic texts, including key books of the Torah and the Talmud and the New Testament, Kabbalistic tradition, and as Masons, we know that tradition and history are sometimes two different things. Kabbalistic tradition holds that these texts, and many others not so well known, were crafted by mystics possessed of profound understanding of the universe and the mysteries of human existence. At a time when writing was a mystery reserved for priests and royalty, they used poetry and parables to express thoughts that everyday language could not accommodate. They assembled the phrases with great art from individual words that conveyed an even deeper level of truth. And finally, each word was made up of unique symbolic letters, each of which revealed yet another story. A story so profound and abstract that it could only be told and understood in the pure language of numbers and mathematics. These sages were full-time holy guys, and they wrote this stuff for other full-time holy guys. And that tiny segment of every generation who would be equipped with the intelligence, the spiritual drive, and yes, the leisure time necessary to embark upon a lifelong quest for enlightenment. I believe that Albert Pike expected Scottish Rite Masons to be among this elite category of seekers. On page 112 of A Bridge to Light, Dr. Hutchins writes the following concerning the Kabbalah. And this is kind of the modern take on it. Quote, "The cycle of closeness to and distance from God experienced by the Hebrews found expression in the deeply symbolic mysticism that arose in medieval Judaism. Of whatever origins, the founders of this system sought to create a purely symbolic and primarily numerological expression of the relationship of deity to man. And even a name was given to distinguish the Kabbalistic concept of God from that of conventional Judaism, Ein Sof, the inexpressible, incomprehensible, ineffable, divine source of all things. Ein Sof roughly translates limitless nothing. It is one of the three levels of negative existence that Kabbalists say preceded creation. In the language of modern physics, it is the negative singularity that preceded the Big Bang. Okay, that's me talking there. Brother Hutchings' quote ended, Ein Sof, the inexpressible, incomprehensible, ineffable, divine source of all things, unquote. And then I pick it up. Now that's pretty heavy stuff and not easy to think about. It's also impossible to talk about using our normal day-to-day language. That's why we need another kind of language. And Brother Hutchins goes on to say, quote, an essential element in the formulation of this mystical theory was to effect an adequate means for the description of God within the limited framework of human language. This was accomplished by transcending language through numerological symbolism. You will regularly hear reference made to the numerology of the Kabbalah in rituals of the degrees of the Scottish Rite. The most important point to remember is that the Hebrew letters were given number equivalents, and so every word was itself a number, the sum of the numerical values of its individual letters, unquote. Now this is me back. I'm just going to give you one example of how this is done. Please take a look at your handout. That's a table of the Hebrew letters. I gave them all. Table of Hebrew letters and their meanings and numbers and stuff. There are 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. 5 of them appear differently when they're placed at the end of a word. You'll notice that each of them represents a number and has a specific meaning. If your name happens to be Al, like our good friend Al Turek, sometimes Al watches this. If so, hi, Brother Al. And his son is also a Mason, too. If your name happens to be Al, like Al Turek, it would be spelled Aleph Lamed. Now, Aleph is 1, and it means an ox. And Lamed is 30 and means an ox goad. I guess this means that Al is self-motivated. In Hebrew, Al is the root word of God. El, Elohim, Eloah, El. It's A-L, but pronounced El. If you spell it backwards, L-A means not or nothing. Can you see the possibilities here? Another brief example is the Hebrew letter for riches and power, and that's spelled Daleth, Bet, Aleph, or DBA. The 3 letters add to the sacred number 7. If we spell DBA backwards, we get the word ABD, which means lost or ruined. Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that the opposite of riches and power is loss and ruin. The order and meanings of the individual Hebrew letters in these words also tell a simple but profound story. The word riches, DBA, suggests a door, and I can point to this on the chart too, so it makes a little more visual sense too. The word bridges, DBA, suggests a door, Daleth or D, to a house or barn or an enclosure represented by the letter B, bet, which opens to receive an ox, an aleph or an A. The ox being the ancient symbol of wealth. However, the word loss or ruin reverses the letters and suggests ox, A, of wealth, finds the barn's door, BD, and escapes. Or to put it bluntly, door equals barn, door plus barn plus ox equals good, because you got your wealth in the barn. But ox plus barn door means the ox gets out. Bad. Okay. We could play around with this all night. Actually, we could play around with this the rest of our lives. But we've got a long night ahead of us. Let's finish up with Brother Hutchins and what he has to say about this in the Bridge of Light. Quote, as well, concise yet complex diagrams were created to explain the nature of deity. Chief among these was called the Tree of Life. This was a diagram variously designed to illustrate the 10 emanations from or manifestations of deity called Sephiroth, unquote. They get into it. To say that there's not an esoteric aspect to it, or that it's unimportant or dangerous to the craft, they get into it. Even Brother Hutchins, the modern, okay, the new improved, okay. Let's take a look at the first diagram of the Tree of Life, the one with Ein Sof up at the top, and I guess I gave everybody a handout too. You'll notice that there are 10 circles which are joined by 22 paths. The 22 paths of the Hebrew alphabet will find a home on the 22 paths. But what are the 10 circles, and where did they come from? The 10 circles are called Sephiroth, which means, roughly, emanations. Just as there can be only one absolute deity, there is really only one real Sephiroth, the top one. The other 9 are just what we see when we look at the top Sephiroth with progressively darker sunglasses. Because we are made in the image of deity, the Tree of Life is also the map of ourselves. The 3 pillars are reminiscent of our, or Masonic's, 3 pillars of wisdom, strength, and beauty. The 10 Sephiroth also represent 10 levels of consciousness. Number 10 at the bottom is the most mundane and earthly, and number 1 at the top is the consciousness of supreme deity. Why there are 10 Sephiroth is a long and interesting story, and has naturally to do partially with the fact that we have 10 fingers. Yeah. I have to wrap it up now. I really do, because these guys have a long night ahead of them. I have to wrap it up now, and I can't think of any better way for us than to hear from Albert Pike himself. Quote, one is filled with admiration on penetrating into the sanctuary of the Kabbalah, at seeing a doctrine so logical, so simple, and at the same time so absolute. The necessary union of ideas and signs, the concentration of the most fundamental, this consecration of the most fundamental realities by the primitive characters, the trinity of words, letters, and numbers, a philosophy simple as the alphabet, profound and infinite as the capital word. theorems more complex and luminous than those of Pythagoras, a theology summed up by counting on one's fingers, an infinite which can be held in the hollow of an infant's hand, 10 ciphers and 22 letters, a triangle, a square, and a circle. These are the elements of the Kabbalah. They are the elemental, excuse me, they are the elementary principles of the written word, reflection of that spoken word that created the world. Thank you very much and enjoy your degree. Constance is going to kill me for going over like this. Anyway, that's that. And I hope the brother I've been talking to gets a chance sooner or later to hear this elaboration, because there's only so much I can put in a little message. Okay. And believe me, I'm not in any way denigrating his curiosity or his opinion, but perhaps there should be more little 20-minute addresses like this before our brothers go through the wonderful and profoundly inspiring degrees of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. Anyway, that's it for today. I look forward to talking to you tomorrow for Saturday morning cartoons. Until then, continue to be good to yourself, be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will.